Welcome to the Enigmatic Abyss, the channel where we explore hauntings, disappearances and enigmas which elude a modern understanding. Get your favorite snack and settle in. Today, we will look at the enigmatic and haunting abduction of Reverend Dr. James Cloud. He tells the story in his own words. The event occurred in the early summer of 1976 in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. This occurred, specifically, in Pine Grove, California. It was early evening. The sun had just set, and it was summertime, so there was still plenty of light, and the sky was beginning to darken. I was sitting in the dirt playing with my Tonka trucks. The trucks were the old, metal, yellow ones that actually wouldn't break unless you really tried to do so. My parents and my grandmother were on the front porch, which was situated to my right and up. The porch had a set of stairs which led up to it since we were in a raised home on the hillside. As I was playing with my trucks, I was alerted to something happening by my grandmother and mother gasping and pointing into the sky. As I looked up, I saw three triangle-shaped air vehicles, in a triangle formation, which had three bright, white lights on each corner and a central red light underneath and in the middle. The bottom of the air vehicles had geometric shapes with right angles from the front of the craft to the rear. They emitted no sound and instead sat ominously above us about 150 to 250 feet. The craft emitted, as best as I can describe, heat waves coming from the bottom of each craft which appeared almost identical to the heat waves which rise from a road on a hot summer day. My grandmother said nervously, "I hope they're not going to hurt us." My parents sat there with surprised expressions. About 2 minutes later the air vehicles went from above our heads and disappeared over the far horizon in less than a second. The vehicles moved so quick that they almost appeared to elongate, as they sped away. I'm certain it was simply a visual interpretation due to the unfathomable speed with which they departed. That night, after I was tucked in bed, I thought about the ships and then went to sleep. I was awakened by an intense thrumming noise. It was a pulsating sound which, to my ears, seemed very loud and consistent. It was then I noticed varied color lights coming from our living room, which was just outside of my bedroom. My bedroom door was never closed, so the lights startled me at first due to their combination with the thrumming sound. I wasn't sure what was happening, so I got out of bed and proceeded to the living room. As I crossed the threshold into the living room, I noticed the lights were actually balls of light in different colors. The colors were blue, green, red and white. Each ball was a different color and they moved in conjunction with the pace of the thrumming sound. There were approximately 30 different balls of light. As I stood there watching the orbs of light and hearing the now overbearing sound of the thrumming, I watched as the lights shot all around the room in synchronicity with the sound. The pulsing sound began speeding up. As it did, the lights also began to speed up. The sound and movement of the lights sped to a crescendo from about a pulse per second to 5 to 8 pulses per second. The lights almost began to blur from the speed of their movement. Once the pulsing and light show reached a certain level, everything went dark. The living room then returned to its normal state. No lights. No sound. Dark and empty. It was very early in the morning or very late at night when this occurred. As I stood there in the darkness and silence, I observed a small, golden ball of light form in the middle of the living room. This small ball of light grew from about 2 to 3 inches across to approximately 3 to 4 feet wide in the space of about 20 seconds. It was then I noticed movement within the now oversized ball of light. I observed a vaguely humanoid being starting to emerge from the light. The body of the entity had the normal look you would expect from a human, but his arms and legs were thin. His arms were very long and spindly. His head was oversized and had a similarity to a baby which is born with advanced macrocephaly. His skin was honey/amber colored, and his eyes were very large. The eyes themselves were beautiful to see. Large irises and large pupils filled the eye sockets. The irises were colored the same as his skin. The overall appearance was that of the widely known greys. However, his coloring was very different and almost regal looking. The entity stepped completely out of the light, and into my living room. He stood about a foot taller than me at age 4. He opened his long, spindly arms and told me, without verbalization, "James, come to me." With no frame of reference at 4 years old and being curious, I went with the entity. I cannot say I entered the light, since my last memory at that point is walking toward the entity. My next memory is being in a building or complex of sorts. I cannot say it was a ship, as I did not have a reference point at this time. The room I was standing in was approximately 50 feet wide and 100 feet long. There were 3 long silvery consoles which stretched lengthwise through the room, with aisles/paths between each of them. I noticed different colored lights on each console, and they appeared identical to each other. At the far side of the room in front of me, I observed a large view screen. There were images of galaxies and planets with data written beside them in an unknown language. The entity beckoned me to follow and took me by my right hand. We slowly walked from a doorway we had come from and proceeded to walk the length of the room toward the view screen between the wall and the first console. The room itself appeared to be silvery, with the same appearance of the consoles. The walls did not have lights on them as the consoles had. As we walked, the entity began to tell me about natural disasters, prophetic events, and things which would occur at a future date. As he was speaking, I'm assuming I had a cautious look on my face, because he told me, "Don't be afraid, we serve the great king." With that, I was apparently satisfied, and we continued our walk. He continued speaking with me in what I suppose would be most similar to telepathy. We spoke with our minds to each other. Words were not used, but we both understood each other well. As we rounded the far end of the room, next to the view screen, we proceeded between the first and second consoles. I should also note that there were other entities that looked almost identical to the one escorting me, busying themselves with the consoles. They never looked toward me. Rather, they were focused on the consoles. I would estimate that there were about 12 to 15 in number. As we approached the ends of the consoles, I observed a small hallway which led further and away from the console area. Beside the hallway was a space between the second console and the wall. In that space sat 2 other children on a silver seat which had 3 places to sit. Each seat on the single seating area was separated at approximately 30 to 45 degrees from each other. The 2 children sat on the side seats which face away from each other, and the middle seat was empty. The children seemed to be holding a tablet-like device and were concentrating on them. They did not acknowledge my presence, nor did they look anywhere except the tablet-like devices. Each child had a silvery hose-like device attached to the back of their heads, and neither one appeared to be in any pain. I observed that the hose-like apparatuses originated from a central, pipe-like structure which traveled from the seats to a spot in the ceiling of the room. I sat down in the chair and was given another tablet-like device, and my memory ends at that point of the event. My next memory was awakening in my bed, and I excitedly told my mother about the silver robot guy and the things which happened the night before. She quickly told me that I watched too many sci-fi movies and told me to forget about it. Keep in mind I was 4 years old and had not watched sci-fi movies at that point in my life. Obviously, a 4-year-old would not create a dream/fantasy comprised of such detailed and directed events and conversations. I was there. It happened. It is burned into my memory. The bishop ends his story here. It should be noted that he is simply one of millions around the world who have been allegedly abducted from their home by unknown entities. What do you think of this abduction story? Write it in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more enigmatic stories.